One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and this is the best day of the week. Not just because the weekend is almost here, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. This is episode number 200, if you can believe it, and if you're scoring at home. And if your local teachers union has closed down your school today for the communist May Day marches, sit your kid down in front of this show. They're going to learn something. My name is Jim Lakely. I am your host and the executive vice president of the Heartland Institute. We are an organization that has been around for 42 years, and we're known as the leading think tank, pushing back on climate alarmism. The Heartland Institute and this show bringing the data, the science, the truth that counters the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to view this show live every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And also like, share, and subscribe. And be sure to leave comments underneath this video from what you see. These all convince YouTube's very mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program. And that gets the show in front of even more people. And as a reminder, big tech and the legacy media are not big fans of the way we cover climate and energy on this program. So as a result, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can join other fans of this program who bring the show to the world every single week. And we also, as we always do, want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and our friends at Heartland UK Europe. We have a very packed show today, so let's get started. We have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts. He's Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change, What's Up With That. We have Sterling Burnett, the Archbishop of Canterbury, whose day job is the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. And we have Linnea Lukin, Senior Fellow for Energy Environment Policy at Heartland. And back this week is our producer, Andy Singer, making sure everything looks and sounds and is presented fantastically for everyone in our audience today. So, like I said, it's a very packed show, so let's get right to it, starting off with the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. All right, so our first item today, this is pretty big news. This has been written about in a lot of places, including at What's Up With That. But I grabbed a story from Roger Pelkey Jr.'s Substack called The Honest Broker. Definitely check that out. It's very much worth the read every week. His headline is RCP 8.5 is officially dead. Now that, if you don't know what RCP 8.5 is, you're going to learn about that very quickly. And why it's officially dead is also very important. Pelkey notes at the top of his piece, this quote from 2021 from Chris Field. He's the co-chair of IPCC's Working Group 2 Assessment Review, or in other words, called AR5. And one of Anthony Watts' favorite people, Marcia McNutt, president of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. Again, this is a quote from 2001. Quote, the high emissions ICP 8.5 scenario has long been described as a business as usual pathway with a continued emphasis on energy from fossil fuels with no climate policies in place. This remains 100% accurate. Well, not anymore. I'll read here from Roger Pelkey Jr.'s Substack post. The international committee responsible for the official scenarios that feed into climate modeling that are the basis for most projective climate research and the assessments of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, has just published the next generation of climate scenarios. Big news. The new framework has eliminated the most extreme scenarios that have dominated climate research over much of the past several decades. Specifically, RCP 8.5, SSP 5 to 8.5, and SSP 3 to 7.0. This is an absolutely huge development in climate science, which will have lasting impacts across research and policy. The future is not what it used to be, he writes. In a paper released earlier this month, Van Buren et al. Introduced a new set of 7 scenarios. The authors write of the obsolete high-end emission scenarios, emphasis added, for the 21st century, this range will be smaller than assessed before. On the high end of the range, the CMIP6 high emissions levels, quantified by SSP 5 to 8.5, have become implausible based on trends in the cost of renewables, the emergence of climate policy, and recent emission trends. Read that again, Pelkey writes. The high-end scenarios are implausible. Pelkey writes, I disagree that the implausibility of the high-end scenarios resulted from the falling cost of renewables or the emergence of climate policy, but that's a debate for another day. What matters today is that the group with official responsibility for developing climate scenarios for the IPCC and broader research community has now admitted that the scenarios that have dominated climate research assessment and policy during the past 2 cycles of the IPCC assessment process are implausible. They describe impossible futures. That's enough from that. Anthony, I want to go with you because you did write about this on your website. What's up with that? Roger Pelkey thinks this is a pretty big deal. We've talked a lot on this show about how implausible it is, the highest temperature predictions of the IPCC. Is climate realism coming to even the IPCC itself now?
Well, that's a possibility, but it may also be a lot like what happened in The Princess Bride, where, they described it as mostly dead, but not truly dead. These things have a way of resurrecting themselves because of the belief system of a lot of these scientists, and especially journalists. Journalists have this thing like a dog with a chew bone. They're not going to let go of it. So I would suspect that even though it might be officially or mostly dead in the science community, out in the journalism world, they're probably going to keep citing this and saying, doom is on the horizon, repent now.
Well, maybe it's doom, but it's not as big a doom as before, and that's meaningful, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say we have a doom reduction. That's probably the right word for this. Doom reduction in process. That would be a good description for it. But these models have always been speculative anyway, and they're always driven by a lot of assumptions. They're always driven by starting conditions. They don't particularly work well for hindcasting. They work well for hindcasting if they do some tweaking, but, just out of the box, they're not that great. And as a result, we end up with the journalists especially believing that models are the same as data because it's being spoken by, true and holy scientists. Instead, what we end up with these projections that just don't reflect anything about reality. And it just scares people. It particularly scares children when they read these headlines based on these doom predications coming out of these models. I'm happy to see that this has happened. Whether or not it really sticks out there in the narrative is another story.
I think, one of the most damaging, I guess, legacies from RCP 8.5 in particular is that there are, like Roger Pelkey Jr. says in his Substack, there are tens of thousands of research papers, especially in the biological sciences, that lean heavily on specifically RCP 8.5, because it's the one that gives the really dramatic results where it says, here's a type of tortoise that is going to be, its range is going to be constricted to only a square mile in the next 50 years because of climate change. Those kinds of studies are all depending on RCP 8.5 as their business as usual scenario or their high end scenario, with moderate reductions as their middle range and net zero as their low range. And RCP 8.5 was never realistic, but it's the headline generator. It's the one that the news articles can come out and say, XYZ species is going to have its range obliterated by 2050 if climate change continues. It's always been frustrating. It's a guarantee pretty much if you look at a headline and it's very extreme, it sounds like, wow, that is a catastrophe. You look at the paper that they're discussing, 9 times out of 10, it's RCP 8.5 that they leaned on, or SSP 5, 8.5, whatever it is. And so it's, it's unfortunate, but it's good that now hopefully they're able to move away from it enough to convince other scientists to move away from it as well.
Yeah, I promised our viewers and listeners that we'd explain what RCP 8.5 is. Would one of you please like to do that?
I think Anthony's probably the best one for that.
Well, okay, so I think it's easier to explain what it isn't. It isn't real. It can't possibly be real. A paper that came out in 2020 showed that there wasn't enough fossil fuel on the planet that we could burn to actually meet the emission scenario that this thing projected for warming into the future. It was impossible. And on that basis alone, it should have been disappeared in 2020, but it's still been hanging on. So basically, it's something called a representative carbon pathway. That's where RCP comes from. And basically, it's just a fancy name for a model that says you throw this much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and you end up with, X down the road. They've got these different models going on. These models say that, okay, so business as usual, reduction, and so forth and so on. Well, the RCP 8.5 was a worst case scenario that wasn't even possible or plausible. So, of course, because it looked the worst, the media just absolutely latched onto it. And that became part of the narrative. They didn't look at the other business as usual or slight reduction models or whatever. They just glommed onto the worst case doom scenario and kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, saying that we're going to have these hellish futures of temperature rise. Well, now science has self-corrected and backed down a little bit. And again, it remains to be seen whether the media will let go of it or not.
Yeah, because real observational data has caught up with the projections and the predictions of the IPCC from going back a couple of decades.
Yeah, the 8.5 part I saw in not to dox our private chat, but in our private chat we were talking about what the actual 8.5 part stands for, and that's just the watts per meter squared energy flux. So what it's saying is it's influencing energy, like the energy input into the system versus it going out by 8.5 watts per meter square. So by 2100.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Now that whole thing is fluxed up.
All right, good one. Okay, well that's big news. We'll keep an eye on that. Maybe we can maybe hit this story again if more developments come up and maybe dig into it a little bit deeper. If you're wondering where Sterling Burnett, the Archbishop of Rantaberry, has gone, he's not gone to Vespers. He's actually doing a radio interview right now, and he will come back. Yes, it's hard not to have Sterling here. He would have been yelling already, but we'll get his thoughts on some of these things later. All right, let's move on to our second item, which I've titled Lee Zeldin versus Capitol Hill. Now, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, who was the kickoff keynote speaker at our climate conference on April 8th and 9th, you can see videos from that right here on this channel, and also go to climateconference.heartland.org, and you can also see all the coverage from that, including Lee Zeldin's speech. Anyway, and that was a news-making one for sure, but he was on Capitol Hill this week making even more news for what is normally ordinary budget hearings. He actually advocated to cut the EPA in half, for which I think he should get the Congressional Medal for Freedom or something like that. He also absolutely destroyed the Democrats who were trying to trap him and make him and his realistic agenda look bad. So one highlight, and we have a couple videos we're going to play here from this because it was really extraordinary. One highlight was when he sparred with 83-year-old permanent leftist Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. And, it's just a beautiful moment. It's about 2.5 minutes. Go ahead and play it, Andy.
When climate change is flooding our streets, poisoning our air, driving up healthcare and disaster costs. How can the EPA justify abandoning that duty to protect Americans to appease polluters under the false flag of economic growth?
Following the law, Section 202 of the Clean Air Act, where does it say anything about fighting global climate change? Loper-Bright, Supreme Court case, you familiar with it?
No, maybe others are. I'm not. But let me ask.
But that's really important. As a member of Congress, Loper-Bright says that we, as an agency, don't have the authority to get creative. If Section 202 of the Clean Air Act,
No, but you don't have. Excuse me. You do not have the right to
was
say
actually
climate
answering your
change
questions.
does not exist. That it's a hoax, and that's where this administration
I
is
understand
coming
you're
from.
upset that you don't know what Loper-Bright is. Do you know what the major
You know,
policies doctrine is?
I'm upset because.
Do you know what the
this
major
is-
policies doctrine is?
You know what, let me just
You're a
say this
member
to
of
you.
Congress. You should know.
Well, you have moved from someone who defended the environment to all of a sudden
I'm very
making
defensive
a-
about not knowing the two biggest landmark Supreme Court cases of the last
and
year
you are
with
very,
regards to your
You are
question.
very defensive about changing your policy and your positions with regard to the environment. Now,
Okay.
you just
Do
tell
you want me
me.
to tell you what the two biggest
No,
Supreme
I
Court
want you to
cases
tell
are of the
me-
last few years?
This is what I want you
Michigan
to tell
versus
me.
EPA,
Whoa.
West Virginia versus EPA.
You know, you're here because you need money from us. So halt for the second and wait for the questions and answer the questions.
Well, I answered your question,
No, you
and you didn't
didn't.
like my answer because
did
you
not
don't know what
answer the
Loper-Bright is,
question.
because you don't know what the major policies doctrine is,
Chairman,
because
this is-
you're
this is how to
asking me,
answer questions.
you're asking me about Section 202 of the Clean Air Act, and you don't read it. You don't know what it says.
Listen, and what you want to do is to deny. You want
No,
to.
I actually read the law. I do my homework.
Really?
You're just somebody who likes to have the microphone on. You know what I have to do? I read the law.
You know,
I
Mr.
read the
Chairman, I
Supreme
don't have
Court
to listen
cases.
to this, and I would say
No,
this,
what you should do
that
for your
this-
constituents is actually
this-
read statute.
This budget is at real risk.
Read
Let
your
me tell
Supreme
you,
Court.
This is the Appropriations Committee.
Oh,
you
you're
come
not-
here.
you care
and
about
you
science?
tell
Now
us-
you're threatening to defund it?
Oh my God! No, you don't fund
Because
science.
you don't know what Loper-Bright
You are
is,
climate
because you don't know what the
deniers.
major policies
You are
doctrine is. Your
climate
message
deniers.
to our folks at the EPA is that you want to
I don't
defund
have
us.
to listen to this BS.
The BS. Do you think I made up these cases?
Yeah, I think you have made up a
I
whole
made
lot of
I made
BS.
up Loper-Bright. I made up West Virginia versus EPA. I made up Michigan versus EPA.
Woe is right. What are you doing? Why
Wait,
are you helping
whoa.
polluters?
I'm actually
Wow.
pretty confident that somebody called the Capitol Police to report a murder, because that was rough.
Oh my goodness. You know, I wonder how stupid do you have to be to vote for this person to be your representative? I mean, good Lord. She's nuts. She is absolutely nothing but a bundle of emotion and completely factually bereft.
Yeah, I would say, she admitted that she didn't know what it was that he was talking about. But that just goes to show, though, that so many of our representatives and so many, especially, people who are more progressive or more Democrats, are so used to our administrative agencies being able to just run roughshod over the law and get to interpret statutes however they want and get to, stretch the meaning of things like the Clean Air Act to encompass carbon dioxide, that they're taken aback and they're completely baffled by someone like Lee Zeldin, who actually cares about following the law as it's written. It's pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, his big action since he's been in that position has been to work for the dismantling of the endangerment findings. She asks him, basically her objection there, or she was upset because she wanted to ask him, what are you doing to fight climate change? And his answer was, that's not our job. Our job is not to fight climate change. That's not what the EPA is here for. And then he laid out the very landmark Supreme Court cases that put restrictions on what the EPA is empowered to do. And she'd never heard of them and doesn't know. And she's on the Appropriations Committee. I'll just say this, you guys can comment a little bit more on it, and then we have another video to play. But before coming to the Heartland Institute, as a lot of listeners and viewers, regular viewers know, I was in journalism for 16 years. I worked for the Washington Times. I covered Congress and then the White House, started off covering Congress. And when I first started reporting from there, I was frankly shocked at how dim-witted so many of these elected representatives were. I mean, it was shocking. And Rosa DeLauro, as I called her, the permanent leftist Congress critter from Connecticut, she's been in office, I think, since 1991. And there's no incentive to learn. And she obviously displayed that yesterday or earlier this week.
Yeah. I would be embarrassed to have her from my representative. I'll tell you that. I mean, wow. But this seems, you're right, Jim. This is a theme in Washington. It seems the more incompetent you are, the more likely you are to get reelected sometimes, especially in blue districts for some reason.
Yeah.
And, when the pigeons finally come home to roost on some of these people, then they go out and try doing this gerrymandering to keep their seats.
Yeah. Well, grandma with a blue streak in her hair is kind of cute, but really only for the family reunion, not really in Congress. All right. And I have another clip here from Lee Zeldin, and because I frankly I just can't seem to like this guy enough. This is him speaking. A lot of what he says here, if you have not yet seen Lee Zeldin's speech at the 16th International Conference on Climate Change, sponsored by the Heartland Institute, what he says here is a lot of what he said in that speech, and it's glorious. Please play it, Andy.
Predictions are made in the past. Science will have a range of the pessimistic to the optimistic. And in order to justify, for example, the 2009 endangerment finding, they were adopting the most pessimistic views of the science. Now, when you get to 2026, great news, you're able to rely on present day facts in 2026 rather than any bad assumptions from 2009. And just because you take exception when a member of Congress says in January of 2019, in 12 years, the world's about to end, if we're sitting here today saying, well, gosh, it's only 4 years and 9 months left, I don't think the world is about to end, they want to vilify you as if you're denying science. I mean, I just saw a clip yesterday where Al Gore was talking about global freezing. I'm like, I'm having trouble keeping up. I thought it was global warming, and now it's global freezing. And I don't know what kind of money is made. You want to talk about making money off of a climate grift? Well, what won't get referenced by your colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle who bring up the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is that the money was going to former Obama and Biden officials. The money was going to Democratic donors. The conflicts of interest that we saw, the amount of self-dealing, the unqualified recipients. Climate United Fund CEO was a special assistant in OMB during the Obama-Biden administration. They received $6.9 billion. If you could go down the list with that entity, you could go through the Coalition for Green Capital about a Biden-Harris climate advisor serving on the board, joining the board in 23 while the organization was applying for GGRF. Power Forward Community CEO of Fannie Mae during the Obama-Biden administration. By the way, if we had 10 more minutes, I could just go through conflicts of interest. They're not offended by that. So we just want to stick to the truth. We want to stick to the science. And if you don't agree with them, you don't follow their logic, well, they'll want to vilify you. But hey, as long as we stay true to these facts, it's good to go. And I'm not going to take morality lessons from people who join all white country clubs.
Ooh. And in case you're not quite in the know, that was a shot. That was the Senate hearing for the budget, and that was a shot at Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, whom he called in a tweet, at least. I didn't see if it was in the clip. Senator White Club, which is what our friend Steve Malloy on social media calls Senator Whitehouse, and that refers to the fact that he is a longstanding member of an all-white beach club in his home state of Rhode Island. So, guys, protect this man at all costs. We cannot lose this man. And I think we should, people talk about, remember the good old days. And the problem with the good old days is that you don't know they're the good days until you look back at them. I think we need to enjoy every day that we have a person who thinks and speaks like this as EPA administrator, because there has not been one remotely close to this in any Republican administration of my lifetime. And I'm not that young.
Yeah, it's truly refreshing. And I'm so glad that he is a friend of the Heartland Institute. I'm so glad that he was able to come speak to us. And, and he hit it. He hit the nail right on the head when he gave his speech at IPCC 16, that we're in a position to celebrate now. We've been vindicated, and he's just such a breath of fresh air. And he's got command of the facts. And when people throw emotion at him, like, DeLauro, just ranting crazy kinds of things, he holds his cool, and that's tough to do. I'm not sure I'd be able to hold my cool as long as he did. But he's a real credit to the administration, and he's a real credit to the EPA because he's sticking to the facts, he's sticking to the law, and he's sticking it to the nut jobs.
Yeah, I was a little bit, I'll admit that I was nervous when he first got selected because he's been on, environmental committees and stuff that, it's pretty frequent that Republicans who end up on those committees are very, very squishy, are terrified of saying anything that goes against what like the mainstream scientific establishment would promote. And so when he came out swinging basically instantly, when we were doing that big live stream of the committee hearings or the the hearings for selecting him to EPA administrator, it was like so much fun to watch. And it's only gotten better from there as he's gotten bolder. I think because he really is doing his homework on this stuff. He's read all of these different Supreme Court cases. He's read the statutes. He's read, probably much deeper into the administrative documentation than anybody could handle before their brain just melted in their skull reading this stuff. I remember when I was in high school, the Affordable Care Act came out and I had tried to read it, and I did read it, but it was an agonizing experience. And I'm sure that pretty much everything having to do with the EPA is like that. So I'm happy to have him in there cleaning house. It is yes, thank you, Tech. Confirmation hearings. I don't know why my brain just doesn't work. But it's a good thing you guys hired me for speaking, and I'm so good at speaking extemporaneously. Anyway, it's just been very, very heartening to me. I have enjoyed every single action he's taken. I really like the position that he generally takes on this stuff is not just like a climate skeptical position, but a purely law-based angle, right? He said at our conference, he said, if they pass a law in Congress that says that the EPA needs to regulate greenhouse gases, then we'll do it. But there is no law that says that the EPA needs to regulate greenhouse gases. So he's following the law. He knows the law, and it's been really great.
Yeah, I mean, he even said in his confirmation hearings that when this sort of thing came up, he's like, I'm limited by statute. If you want me to regulate greenhouse gases, pass the law. You're not going to do that because you don't have the votes. And so you're trying to implement a radical climate policy through administrative fiat, and I'm not going to do it because I am charged with enforcing the law and following the law as it is written, and that's what he's going to do. And that's not a radical position. It's actually the right and constitutional position. Well, welcome back, Sterling. You missed all the good video clips of Lee Zeldin. Oh, well.
Yeah. Did you have Sheldon White's only clip?
When he called him White Club. Well, he didn't call him that.
That was in his his X account.
Yeah, he tweeted Senator White Club.
He didn't say it to him.
Right.
But DeLauro was an idiot. She doesn't know the law. White House was also an idiot, but for a completely different reason. If you saw any of that testimony where he was grilling, you're supposed to ask questions. He asked one question, as far as I can tell, whether 9 cents is less expensive than 18 cents. And then he wouldn't let him explain what was going on there. But more importantly, he was grilling them on all sorts of things that Zeldin, if I was Zeldin, I would just say, sir, I have nothing to do with that. Zeldin doesn't control the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management that does offshore wind. That's Burgum. Talk to Burgum. Zeldin doesn't control keeping the coal plants open. That's Chris Wright, Department of Energy. Talk to them. I have a much narrower range of authority. Talk to me about the things that I actually have power over. But no, White House was holding him responsible for things he had no control over. Not as a matter of whether these actions were sanctioned by law, but as a matter of who actually issued or pulled permits. Not Zeldin. He didn't pull permits for offshore wind. Not Zeldin. He didn't issue a.
Yep. Oh, Sterling froze.
And he's gone.
And he's frozen again. All right. I was going to say, Sterling,
That's that global freezing going on.
Yeah, Sterling, you don't get to come into this show late because you had a radio interview to do, and then just start ranting, on your own. That's not okay. That is kind of how the show works. But all right.
I think he's got a rant on demand button myself.
He does. You're supposed to warm up to that, man. You gotta.
Well, no, I had a 30-minute radio show where I was warming up.
Oh, great. All right. Well, let's move on. We do have a lot to get to today. Glad to have you back, Sterling, and for the rest of the show. All right. Our third item today, I call a damned idiotic idea, and damned is spelled the clean way, not the first way. This comes from climaterealism.com, which is a website that we populate at least 3 times a week. The headline is, "No, New York Times, we don't need to dam the Bering Strait." So Anthony Watts actually posted this. Let me read a little bit from it and then kick it over to Anthony. The New York Times reports in, quote, "a new idea to save the climate, dam the Bering Strait," that scientists have proposed building a 50-mile-long dam between Alaska and Russia to stabilize the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC, in order to prevent climate catastrophe. This is a seriously risky idea. The proposal is not an engineering plan grounded in observational need, but rather is a computer model thought experiment based on speculative tipping point scenarios not justified by data concerning the AMOC or an understanding of what the possible future consequences might be for humans, the oceans, and sea life. Anthony, you wrote this, as I mentioned, for climaterealism.com, which I hope people visit every day, and I'm not going to read anything more from it. I'm going to let you explain what this is and why it's a dumb idea.
Well, it's not just a dumb idea. It's an extraordinarily dumb idea. First of all, we are told almost weekly lately that the AMOC over in the Atlantic is going to collapse, because of climate change, that the current is going to shut off. And when the current shuts off, disaster deluxe is going to descend upon us. Okay, so we've got that. Now, if that's true, and everyone is saying that, this is going to happen and disasters on the future, why is it okay to suddenly say, over on the other side, over on the West Coast, let's dam the Bering Strait to prevent that current so that the sea ice doesn't leak out? I mean, what kind of mental disconnect do you have to have in order to think that's okay? And that's just the beginning of it. The engineering challenge on this, even if they were to go about it, is just beyond doability in most cases. I mean, they've been talking for decades about putting a bridge across the Bering Strait, and that was deemed, next to impossible. But now somebody, because of a modeling study, decided, hey, let's just dam it. We'll just build that. But this is a person or persons who wrote this that have no concept of what it takes to engineer or actually build something. They're completely out of the loop in terms of sensibility or understanding of those sort of things. And so this is the kind of garbage that the New York Times decides it's worthy to put up on the front page. I mean, these folks on so many levels are completely disconnected and from the reality. They just don't have a clue. And I'm shaking my head every time I wrote a paragraph in this thing, like, gosh, this is stupid. How did you not even question this? And I look at the modeling study and it just, your usual dreck and so forth. And the law of unintended consequences is huge in this thing. But what if we did dam it? What's going to happen? Well, we shut off an ocean current that goes between the Arctic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Does the Pacific warm up? Does it cool down? Does sea life get trapped? I mean, all these different things that they're not even thinking about. They did mention in it, we don't know really what's going to happen if we do it, but we think it's a good idea. It's just beyond stupid. That's all I can say about it.
They need money for more modeling. That's what they need more money for.
That's right. Sterling, what about the polar bears? Oh no, what are they going to do if a dam is covering the entire Bering Strait?
It's not an engineering problem. I think probably with today's technology, they might be able to pull this off. You know, who knows? I think it would be, but
No.
and it's not just stupid. Oh, orca ladders. Now that's funny. You could do polar bear ladders as well. You know, sure. Or you could have polar bear crossings on the dam.
Yeah.
Right. It's more than stupid. It's positively dangerous. They just there is the idea that they have this telescopic sight. There's just one thing on their minds. All the environmentalists, they used to care about different things. They cared about birds. They cared about ecosystems. They cared about wildlife. They cared about all sorts of things. Now they care about climate change, and it's the one thing. And when climate change is their focus, everything else, no matter how damaging, just goes out the window. So they don't know how it'll affect sea life. They don't know how it'll affect coastal communities. They honestly don't know how it'll affect the Earth's the Earth's climate, because ocean currents are a key part of the Earth's climate. They don't know. They speculate. They fear that the AMOC is about to collapse, though the IPCC 16 doesn't say it's about to collapse. I mean, the IPCC doesn't say it's about to collapse. The research on what the AMOC is doing, some research says it's declining. The speeds are declining, not an immediate collapse, but the speeds are declining. Some say it's about the same as it always has, with variations. It's always been always had variations. And some say it's actually increasing in speed. We cover this in Climate Realism. That, you know, it's all over the map. But even if it were declining, they say I'm constantly told, don't fool with Mother Nature. Let nature take its course. This would be the grandest geoengineering scheme in the history of mankind. And I mean, this is a bigger one. This is a bigger one than putting a parasol up in space trying to drop some sun, trying to block some sun. This is a bigger engineering feat, and a more dangerous one, a less predictable one. And South Park has this one episode where they confuse this robot, this Cartman in some cardboard boxes, as a robot, and the military constantly mocks the scientists, calling Mr. Scientist, Mr. Scientist. You know, in the 50s, mad scientists were everywhere on the movies, the black and white movies. We're doing all sorts of things. This is mad scientist, 1950s black and white mad science stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty true. That's pretty true, Sterling. Hey, I want to comment on something you said, Sterling. You talked about them having the telescopic vision or tunnel vision.
Yeah,
Jim, I think at the next IPCC 16 or 17 rather, we should offer some giveaways. You know, we had the little hockey sticks and the drink this time. Well, next time, I think we should offer some blinders you can put on that have sides like this. Then there's a CO2 molecule hanging out here, you know, because that's all they see.
You go ahead and work on that in your garage, Anthony. We'll go through some different models.
Yeah, well,
maybe I'll demo it next week.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm compiling a list of all the make work studies that come out, and I'll take a slightly different tack here. I don't have a particular animosity towards scientists who are doing these like modeling, you know, pie in the sky, what if Marvel comic type research. It bothers me if the government is funding it, aka if I'm funding it. But what is shocking and annoying about these studies time and again is that they're presented like it's a real thing that we're going to do or that we should do. The New York Times, like, I get it. New York Post posted that article about the curtain that they're going to put in Antarctica to stop the water from melting off. Very stupid. Fun to model, I'm sure. I'm sure they had a lot of fun making that. Very stupid to think that we're going to actually do that big of a geoengineering project and that it wouldn't have, again, cascading effects downstream. But this is the same category as the parasols in space, the Antarctica curtain, gene editing to make people shorter so that we use less energy. which is a real thing that they really did propose. All this stuff is again, make work studies. They wanted to model something about climate change. Climate change is how you get funding. Hopefully less so with Trump. I haven't seen, firm numbers on whether or not this stuff is getting defunded at the federal level. But this is the kind of thing that they spin up because they want to do research in general. And this is how they keep their jobs. You have to publish something. And so here they are publishing, we're going to dam the Bering Strait to stop climate change. Okay,
maybe,
sure.
maybe
We're
we
gonna
can get Lauro on this idea.
I'm gonna make
get her to push it.
I'm gonna have a study where we are going to drive a nuclear submarine around, pinging the ocean floor until Godzilla comes up, and then we're gonna make him fight Penguilla on the equator to reduce global warming. Like, this is the level of possibility here. It's ridiculous. But the New York Times, the New York Times is a former newspaper, of course. It's not exactly what it used to be. But it's still like, it makes me wonder if the reporters who are publishing this thing, who wrote this thing up, didn't even once stop and think, this is kind of silly to be putting in the New York Times, isn't it? Just ridiculous.
Yeah, well, it was all the news that was fit to print, apparently.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Evidently, you might be right. Maybe it was make work for these guys. Maybe it was a not interesting modeling exercise to see what you'd come up with. They're getting funding for it from somewhere, probably from at least partially from the government. Though I suspect the funding was in the works before Trump came into office. Usually these studies take longer than, a couple of months. But that's the real discouraging thing about the whole thing. You hit on it at the very end. The New York Times claims to be the paper, the dominant paper. All the news that's fit to print. This was not fit to print. This was not news. This was not news.
What's doubly frustrating? We can move on. Speaking of New York, but that's on our next item here. But what's doubly frustrating about this is that the good actual science that is being done by people who are not being paid by the government, who are actually following the data and are releasing studies that do not show alarmism, like Anthony Watts and others, get no mainstream media attention. Only all the garbage that has no plausibility and feeds into the climate alarmist narrative. That's the only stuff that ever gets into the New York Times. And
but Jim, and here's another thing too. If there wasn't this incentive to use climate change as like the funding lever for a lot of these studies, maybe these, engineering modelers could have been working on like useful bridges or useful, hydroelectric modeling projects or something that isn't just
how to recharge aquifers, how to recharge depleted aquifer, cheaper desalination technologies, things like that.
We've been talking about science fiction, bad science fiction from the 1950s. One of my favorite campy science fiction movies from the 1950s was a movie called Them. It's about these giant ants that got, supersized, like the size of cars because of nuclear radiation, in the desert and all this stuff. I would really, really love to see that movie remade. But instead of it being radiation, it's climate change that caused these giant ants, and I wouldn't put it past Hollywood to produce it.
They're adapting to climate change by growing larger.
Yeah. Well, I thought for a minute there you're going to call Godzilla bad science fiction, and then I was just going to kick you off the show by hitting one single button. That's all it was going to take. You stepped just back from the precipice, my friend. Good for you. All right. Let's move on to our next item here. New York's crushing energy policies. This comes from the New York Post. New York's climate mandates may send fees in affordable co-op city complex soaring from $950 to $4,000. Yeah, we talk about this a lot, and now reality is hitting these alarmists in the face. Let me read from it. A top co-op city official warned that residents could pay 4 times more in monthly maintenance charges if the New York State's controversial green energy laws aren't peeled back. Jeffrey Buss, Co-op City's general counsel, claimed monthly maintenance fees could skyrocket from $950 for a one-bedroom to more than $4,000 to pick up the tab for the green energy edicts. Some 50,000 working and middle-class residents of the Bronx complex, which is America's largest residential cooperative, could see their affordable digs become unaffordable if the co-ops are forced to dish out as much as $1 billion to rewire buildings and revamp infrastructure, he said. Carbon reduction, quote, carbon reduction is important, Buss said, but you can't achieve it by destroying affordable housing. No, Mr. Buss, carbon reduction is not actually important. And welcome to the world of the wholly expected consequences of these laws.
You absolutely can achieve it by destroying affordable housing. That's the whole point. That's the only way to achieve it.
Actually, yeah, right on the money. Let me finish reading from it here first, and we'll all jump in. Important details here. Co-op City, developed in the 1960s under a state affordable housing initiative, has an on-site power plant fueled by natural gas that helps supply electricity, heat, hot water, and air conditioning to the development's 15,372 residential units. It's amazing. Across 35 high-rise buildings and 7 townhouse clusters through 26 miles of pipes. That's all included in the co-op's monthly maintenance fees. But if the buildings have to shift to other sources, the complex may have to pay for energy costs, quote, at a price which would exceed existing costs by nearly 500% per year. Its power plant is so efficient that the River Bay Corporation, Co-op City's corporate entity, sells its surplus gas to Con Edison. Quote, it's a genius system. We're highly efficient from an energy standpoint, unquote, Buss said. But yeah, that doesn't matter, guys, because natural gas is bad, say all the people you vote for. So suck it up and go broke, I guess. Linnea, I want to start with you because we are in the middle of releasing our Energy at a Glance series of videos starring yourself. Skyrocketing energy prices are the inevitable result when you purposely make energy more expensive and less reliable.
Well, I couldn't have said it better. I mean, that's, yeah, when you make energy prices go up on purpose in order to incentivize people to use less energy, energy becomes less affordable. Yeah. But so this is an interesting situation because you have a little bit of like mean pleasure that you get from these jerks kind of reaping what they've sown, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have all these little socialists who said, you know, we're going to make this, you know, controlled little neighborhood that's our 10-minute city or 15-minute city, whatever kind of a thing, or in this case, probably more like a 5-minute city type situation. And all of a sudden, the bill comes due on their aspirational, you know, green policy stuff that they all almost certainly supported at the state and local, like the city level, thinking that it wasn't going to impact them. I don't really know if people fully understand how expensive green infrastructure is. And it's in part not their fault. One, people should be more curious and they should have a little bit of skepticism. But I've said this a billion times, not everybody has the time or the bandwidth to be an expert on everything. This is one, a failure of local government not keeping track of the facts on the ground when it comes to these investments. And two, the mainstream media telling people over and over and over again, like a drumbeat, that wind and solar are less expensive than any other energy source, that we need to get rid of things like gas and coal and even nuclear in some cases. I think today I was reading something, I think we've shut down like 41 nuclear reactors across the United States in the last couple decades. So they're taking those offline too, and they're not replacing them. And so it's this pie in the sky stuff again, that they're not looking at numbers as they exist in real life. They're looking at modeled or studied, you know, kind of hypothetical numbers and thinking that they can build infrastructure off of that. And the worst part of it is the battery thing. I have heard from conservatives, I have heard from left-wingers, I've across the spectrum that any day now we are going to have a battery revolution. And so they approve of, even legislators on the right are approving of infrastructure projects on the assumption that eventually we're going to have a battery revolution, and we'll be able to have super long-term storage of electricity in batteries that will take up less space than they do now. You should not be designing civil infrastructure off of hypotheticals, off of
Right.
technology that doesn't exist yet. It would be like if someone was, and I guarantee someone would do this, build a smart city or something around nuclear fusion, as though it's already been proven at the utility level, and
or build a
would be-
bridge.
Yeah.
Or build
build
a
a bridge in the
spiderweb
Bering
scope.
Yeah, a wall in the Bering Strait. So you have to be careful about this stuff. And there are so many people who are pushing it because they have this sort of, well, if we invest enough in it, the technology will materialize. Maybe, probably not. It can happen. I'm not, but it's just a fool's errand. These guys are finding out, and all of New York and all of probably New England is going to find out, and they already are finding out.
Yeah.
Energy prices are just going up and up, and the UK has found out, but their politicians across the pond there are blaming it on oil and gas. Of course, it's
Well, I mean, they've already, you described these hypothetical future technologies and setting up a whole energy infrastructure as if it can support it. They've already done that now with solar and wind. It's not working.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
There's a chance. It's not a good one.
There was so much in what Linnea said to unpack. First off, they were warned. Heartland has been warning them. Others have been warning them, been telling them, here's the data. You will pay more. You will have less supply. It's not that they didn't have time to look into this. It's that they ignored everything that had to do any fact-based evidence that would derail their vision. They had a vision, and it was a tunnel vision. Climate change is the most important existential threat we face, and so we've got to remake society to fight climate change. And it was cost be damned. When you pass a green energy mandate for wind and solar, and you say you must use this percentage, and then you don't put a cost cap into it, you're saying regardless of the cost. They didn't care until their constituents started paying the price. And then people like the New Jersey governor, people like the Virginia governor, they ran on affordability. They were in power. They could have done affordability. They could have done the things for affordability. They implemented the policies that raised the prices. And their response is to double down on those same policies, as if that's going to fix the situation, as if more and more unreliable, expensive energy is going to reduce energy prices. I feel no sympathy for these guys. The facts were there. They ignored them because they had a vision. And now they're reaping the harvest that they've sown, or I should say their constituents are, and they're having to, everyone told them, not everyone, the liberals didn't tell them, and that's all they listened to. Anyone who looked at data told them, this is going to raise your prices and decrease your reliability. They said, no. As once again, Linnea said, well, if we say it, it will be done. That's what they do with these studies all the time. I've seen studies for 20 years saying, here's 20 wedges. And if you do these 20 wedges, you get carbon neutrality and the world is safe from climate change. Some academic in an ivory tower tells you that, and they run with it. Congress says, we've passed a law to, or the agencies say, we passed a law to cut emissions, thus emissions will be cut. Look, if it was that easy to get really hard stuff done, regardless of whether we think the hard stuff needs to be doing, if it's really hard, then why hasn't Congress the law banning cancer? Saying by 2035, cancer will be outlawed. They've never done it. Why? If all it takes is them passing a law, it's the power of idiotic, misinformed, self-misinformed, wishful thinking. And you know, I don't know whether to feel sorry for these people or to say, well, you put it on yourself by voting for the people. You know, Einstein's definition of madness, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Well, that's what they did in New Jersey. They doubled down on stupid. They doubled down on stupid in New York. They keep electing the same Democrats that put them in the situation they're in and expect different results. Or to say, look, let them go to hell. Let the New York go to hell and keep the borders open in Texas and in Florida, and we'll benefit from the people moving down here. Though if they move down here, then they vote the way they did in New York, we're screwed.
Yeah. Anthony, go ahead. You're on mute. You're on mute, Anthony.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a mutant. Anyway, all I can say is what Linnea and Sterling said, because I really can't add to any of that.
Oh. All right. Well, I'll just add one last thing, and that's just this. I find this so kind of tragic, doubly tragic, because against all odds, a co-op in New York City had a really good thing going. Cheap, reliable natural gas energy, so abundant that they're selling it back to Con Ed. I mean, holy moly. And they blew it. They blew it over a green dream. All right. Speaking of green dreams, King Charles was in the United States this week. And, well, he gave a couple speeches, and I think they're worth going over real quick, especially considering his focus on stopping climate change from his big global position here. I'm going to read, believe it or not, from the Huffington Post. The headline here is King Charles low-key takes down Donald Trump in speech to U.S. Congress. Briefly here, it says King Charles subtly took Donald Trump to task during a historic speech to the U.S. Congress. The monarch made clear his opposition to the U.S. president's policies in a range of areas, including climate change and his approach to NATO. In an apparent rebuke of Trump's skepticism about climate change, King Charles spoke about the, quote, disastrously melting ice caps of the Arctic. I do not have video of him saying that, but I do have this bit from Charles about the environment that, to me, when I watched it, it seemed a little bit out of time. And maybe this will become clear once we play. Can you play Charles 1, please, Andy?
So as we look toward the next 250 years, we must also reflect on our shared responsibility to safeguard nature, our most precious and irreplaceable asset.
The No Kings crowd giving a standing ovation to the king, by the way. I'll point that out.
Beautiful.
Millennia before our nations existed, before any border drawn, the mountains of Scotland and Appalachia were one, a single continuous range forged in the ancient collision of continents. The natural wonders of the United States of America are indeed a unique asset, and generations of Americans have risen to this calling. Indigenous, political and civic leaders, people in rural communities and cities alike, have all helped to protect and nurture what President Theodore Roosevelt called the glorious heritage of this land's extraordinary natural splendor, on which so much of its prosperity has always depended. Yet, even as we celebrate the beauty that surrounds us, our generation must decide how to address the collapse of critical natural systems, which threatens far more than the harmony and essential diversity of nature. We ignore at our peril the fact that these natural systems, in other words, nature's own economy, provide the foundation for our prosperity and our national security.
Lee Zeldin is not impressed. All right, that's the end of that video. The reason I said that struck me as a little bit out of time until maybe the last bit there is that he's not saying anything that that would have been said during Theodore Roosevelt's time. when protecting the environment was about conservation, not ending all use of fossil fuels to reduce CO2 that is supposedly destroying the planet. So I kind of give him a half credit there. What do you guys think?
I'm going to hand this one to Sterling because I know that mention of Roosevelt is making his blood boil.
It's triggering, you might say. Look, conservation. The original books where conservation defined, the very first line in Gifford Pinchot's book is conservation stands for use. That's what it said. Conservation stands for use. The wise use of resources over time. Not preservation, not stasis. And of course, stasis is impossible. That's where the ecologists get wrong about ecosystems. Oh, this is the ideal ecosystem. No, ecosystems don't stay the same. They change over time. They evolve, just like the climate does. As far as Charles, look, I think he is look, he's a figurehead even in England. He has no real power. He has responsibility. He has to go around and make speeches and stuff, but he has no real power. That was taken from his the king centuries ago. I loved Jim. I just got to say, that was the best quip I've heard in many of these things when you said the no king's crowd cheering for the king. I love that. I wish I'd thought of that. Look, he's irrelevant. He can make speeches to Congress, but he's irrelevant. And his views are uninformed. He's already said the earth was, if we don't do something in 8 years, I forget what year it was, if we don't act to fight climate change in 8 years, then
we're going to get to that.
Okay.
We're going to get to that. In fact, that's a great that you just set me up greatly for the second clip here from Prince Charles. Sorry. Oh my God.
He was Prince then. He
was Prince then. So that's not too much of a faux pas. So this is just a reminder. This comes from our friend Mark Morano from CFAC. This is actually from his 2016 film Climate Hustle, showing how Charles and a lot of people have been all over the place with their climate doom and gloom predictions. So please play that, Andy.
Be in no doubt that unless greenhouse gas emissions reach their peak within about 100 months, just 100 months, it may well be too late to stop temperatures rising beyond dangerous levels. The grim reality is that our planet has reached a point of crisis, and we have only 7 years before we lose the levers of control. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have only 86 months left before we reach the tipping point. We are running out of time. How many times have I found myself saying this over recent years?
It's hard to keep up with all these predictions. Is it decades?
We need to cut the consumption of fossil fuels by over half in the next 20 years.
Years.
The clock is ticking.
Days. Hours. Now?
We have to do something right now to stop global warming.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark Morano from CFAC with Climate Hustle. You can check that out. It's probably not too hard to find. It's a very good movie. We screened it at one of our climate conferences years ago. But yeah, that's just to show. Maybe I'm giving King Charles too much credit, but he seemed to, like everybody, this was the theme of one of our shows a couple weeks ago on Earth Day week, actually, that the volume of climate alarmism seems to have gone down. Look how then Prince Charles used to talk about it then. He wasn't quite as explicit about it in this trip to the United States this week.
Yep.
Well, maybe he's more measured as a king than he was as a prince.
Yeah. Or maybe he just knows it's a losing message because it is.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to this one just because it's like, here's another one. Here's another one of these guys saying, every year that it's next year and then the next year and then the next year forever. It doesn't run out.
You sure about that?
I just don't know. I just don't know how you live like that constantly on the brink of apocalypse.
And with so little self-reflection after being wrong, if you make predictions all these years out and years go by, time is going to tell, and time is told that these predictions are BS. So,
but you said something right there, Linnea. How do you live like that? He doesn't live like that. He never lives like tomorrow is the end of the world. He takes private jets. He lives in castles. He eats fine meals. Hundreds of millions of dollars of Great Britain's revenue goes to his coffers every year. He doesn't live like he's wearing a hair shirt and we've got to cut back. So he doesn't live like that. Neither did, just like Obama. The seas are going to rise. So when I retire, I'm going to buy beachfront property.
Yeah, I need a T-shirt that says "I survived apocalypse now." Because really, it's what it is. Apocalypse now every day for these folks.
Yeah.
Well, that's like Michael Schellenberger, who we've had a guest on the In the Tank podcast years ago. His book was called Apocalypse Never. He woke up because the data showed him that what he was told his whole life was wrong. And, applaud, credit to him that he let the data, guide him and not alarmism.
It's the once and future global boiling.
Yeah. For sure. All right. Let's finally, this is the longest it's taken us to get to the main topic that's in the thumbnail. And I know people are getting antsy, including the people on this show probably, but let's get into it. It's weather season again, but let's set this up with a little bit of fun nostalgia. Can you play that? Can you play a special video for us, Andy?
Say ya pues, Wabbit. It's Wabbit season.
Duck season. Wabbit thiefin'. Duck season. Wabbit thiefin'. Wabbit season.
Duck thiefin', fire!
Yes, it's spring, which means it's weather season. So we're soon going to be seeing stories about how this will be the worst tornado season. It'll be the worst allergy season. It'll be the worst hurricane season ever. You can bank on that. Guaranteed, those stories are already written in the pipeline. But let's actually take these one by one, and maybe if the audience has some suggestions, we can also address those. But let me start with you, Linnea. You recently, we recently published a video that you did on allergy season. Alarmists are going to say that allergy season has been getting worse because of global warming, and we're to blame, and it'll only get worse in the future. What's the truth about allergy season?
The truth is that allergy season is worse because of global warming.
Okay.
However, they are missing the whole point here. What causes allergy season? An increase in pollen during the springtime when trees are budding and they are being pollinated by all sorts of little pollinators. What are one of the biggest environmental issues that people cite all the time as a major tipping point of ecological collapse? That is lack of pollinators, or pollinators running out of food because fewer people are planting flowers and there's not as many wildflowers in nature or whatever. This is a positive thing for ecosystems. It is good for plants to have a little bit, a couple weeks earlier, springtime start. It's a little bit warmer. Precipitation is a little bit higher, so plants are growing more. That's why, in addition to increases in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you see a measurable greening of the planet. So yes. But, and I suffer from bad allergies, especially when it's not the pine pollen, but the pine pollen just signals it. When my entire house and car and yard and driveway are yellow with the pine pollen, I know it's time to start taking a daytime allergy medicine.
Yeah.
I'm
allergic. I'm allergic year round. I'm allergic to bullshit.
Yeah. So it is if there is a mild trend in springtime warming, and it's not so much that spring is getting hotter, it's that it's getting less cold in the later winter, in the earlier springtime winter like transition zone. So that is not an apocalypse. It's not the end of the world. So yeah, that my dog does sound serious. She's allergic to anybody delivering mail to the house. But yeah, so they're partially right about this one, but the reason that they run these articles is not to celebrate more food for bees and butterflies and all those little critters that we enjoy. and that produce food for us and that help us to have enough, crops and beautiful plant life and lush growth and everything. The reason they post these stories is to make people upset about climate change because allergies.
Yeah,
Allergies are dangerous.
Longer growing seasons are a good thing.
Yep.
Greening Earth is a good thing. 2 decades ago, if they said the Earth was greening, everyone would have loved it. Or 3 decades ago, before climate change became the issue. You can see, if you've been watching me at all, you've seen me rubbing my eyes. I'm having the allergy stuff right now. I need to take my medicine. But it's also, and Anthony has written about this. It's not something I had looked into, but Anthony looked into it. It's not uniform that allergy season is growing, especially it's growing near urban areas. Well, why is that? Well, because they're warming faster. They warm earlier because of the urban heat island effect. So plants are blooming earlier in and around urban areas, and that's causing an increase in allergies in and around urban areas. The rural rates are not increasing that much. So
I want to point this out too. It's not as if these people are worried about, because they're so human centric. They're so worried about allergy season because they just love people, right? Yeah. They want us to use all organic farming and stuff because they want yields to be lower so that people starve. They want to introduce wolves and stuff all over the place because they really don't care if the wolves are eating people's livestock and hurting people that way. They do not care. They are Mother Earth first. The reason that they promote the allergies thing as a bad thing is because if people are scared enough, they will get on board with their other eco projects.
Yep.
Right.
All right, Andy, what about what I just said is not true? Because that's a sarcastic drop. That's not a I agree with you drop.
We'll have to get a new one then for that. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to a second season that it is right now, because it is spring, and that is tornado season. I actually had a tornado touchdown pretty close to my house here in northern Illinois just a couple of weeks ago. It was pretty wild. But again, Anthony, the alarmists say that tornadoes are becoming more frequent and stronger as the globe warms, which is our fault, of course. So what's the truth about tornadoes?
Well, the truth is that tornadoes have actually gotten less frequent over the past 50 years or so. And it's right there in the data. And it's always been in the data. But, because some people decide to say climate change is making tornadoes worse, just simply because they believe it to be, then that narrative gets repeated all over the place. At Climate at a Glance, our tornadoes page, if you scroll down on that, you'll see a graph way down there. There it is, right there. Look at that. That graph there shows the EF3 and greater strength tornadoes, the strongest tornadoes. And they are not getting worse. They're declining. Why? Well, because when you have very sharp differences between warm air and cold air that clash together in frontal systems in the Midwest, you end up with stronger tornadoes. It's just the way the whole Norwegian cyclone model works. But when you have less difference, because, you have warming at the poles or whatever, you don't get such strong clashes. Yeah, we'll still have some occasional outbreaks. And yes, of course, whenever we have a tornado outbreak, it will be immediately, unashamedly blamed on climate change. The fact is that the trend over the long term is down. So, there's nothing to worry about. Yeah, you can still get a tornado that's going to rip your house apart. But, that's just what life is in the Midwest.
That's certainly what life is in Texas. Mineral wells got hit just this week. We worried about it here in my house. We have constantly listened for the tornado sirens during a heavy storm. I thought we were going to have hail smash our windows. But, in the end, it's always about not the anecdote, but the data. Every tornado outbreak is an anecdote that climate alarmists will leap on. But if you look at the data over time, what Anthony showed, even as we're better at recognizing tornadoes, we've got better systems. In 50, 70 years ago, if a tornado happened in the middle of Kansas and never hit a home or a community, we might not have known about it because a lot of tornadoes form and dissipate before they do any damage.
Mhm.
But now we can detect those with Doppler radar and other systems much more frequently. Just like hurricanes in the ocean that never struck land. We couldn't have found them before unless they came across a boat that reported it.
Yeah.
Now we find them, and even with that, the numbers aren't increasing. The severity is decreasing, as Anthony said, because the discrepancy between hot and cold is shrinking.
Yeah. Well, Sterling, you mentioned hurricanes, and that's hurricane season is on the way. I believe it starts 1 month from today on June 1st officially.
Yep.
And again, the alarmists, you got to prepare yourself because you're going to see stories in the media where they say that human-caused global warming has made hurricanes stronger and more frequent and more damaging, and they're killing more people. What's the truth?
Well, it's just wrong. The truth is, hurricanes are not becoming more frequent, more powerful, more severe. Research shows this, data shows this. Now, sometimes we're going to have bad hurricane seasons. Last couple of seasons, they predicted extraordinarily high hurricane seasons, and then we haven't had them. I forget, did we have a landfalling hurricane in the U.S. last year? I'm not sure we did. We had the remnants. We had predictions. I saw those cones like everybody else did. They're going to strike here, going to strike there. They didn't for the most part. But the point is, the data does not show an increase in hurricanes. And to be fair, we often criticize the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. To be fair, they don't say that hurricanes should be getting worse or more severe. And the reason is they understand how hurricanes work. Hurricanes work to some extent like tornadoes do. They rely on the gap between hot and cold to drive severity. But formation can be destroyed by wind shear, by sands blowing in from the Sahara Desert. A lot of things suppress hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the truth is, we will have hurricanes. We will have tropical storms. That's not new. It's happened throughout history.
Yeah.
It's only in the last 30 years that we've attributed it to me starting up my car.
Yeah.
Or you turning on your lights, Jim.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have there on the screen for people watching the YouTube and Rumble and X feeds. There's charts there for total tropical storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes, and there is no upward trend at all on any of those. In fact, global cyclonic activity is basically a flat line for the last several decades. So, just keep that in mind. It's easy to remember when you start getting gaslit and lied to by the mainstream media on that issue. So, thank you very much, Sterling. In fact, I'm sure we'll get into hurricane. We have hurricane experts like Stan Goldenberg, who's a fan of the show. Probably have him back on when hurricane season is almost here to talk about what's coming up. But, as we said, it's weather season. And you know what? You need an investment for all seasons. And that investment comes in precious metals, which gets us to the sponsor of this show, which is Advisor Metals. If you listen to a lot of conservative shows like I do on streams, you hear a ton of pitches for buying gold, silver, and other precious metals. There are so many companies out there that can do that for you. But we want to tell you why you should trust our sponsor, Advisor Metals, and that's the man who runs the company, Ira Bershatsky. Ira is the managing member of Advisor Metals, and he does not employ the high-pressure tactics or those deceptive marketing ploys like you see from many in big gold. He also doesn't deal in so-called rare coins that you don't really want. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you're dealing in quality, real bullion. And that is so much better when it comes time to liquidate this valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you're going to have that investment sent discreetly to your home. And it might even make your dog bark, but it's going to be worth it. Ira is also advertising on this program because he is an America First patriot. He does not donate to Democrats. He does not buy into the climate alarmism hokum. He refuses to work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party, and he, like us, abhor the machinations and schemes of outfits like the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. That is why we are so proud to have him as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio, and if you want to back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals, go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. You can leave your information there, and Ira will make the process very easy for you. Go to climaterealismshow.com/metals and be sure to tell them who sent you, because that helps us in this program while you're helping your financial future. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and thank you for, maybe I got a nice comment or two for my segue. I appreciate it. I see people smiling. It is now time for Q&A. Take it away, Linnea. Oops.
No drop?
We lost
All right.
people.
He's going to cut me off. He's waiting. Yep, there it is. All right.
That was me waiting. I did it. Andy was sliding things around.
Alrighty. Here's Mick Shepard, who says, so North Carolina's mining is going to make electric cars happen again? Or I guess is North Carolina's mining going to make electric cars happening again? Well, that remains to be seen. I know. So for the context of what I believe that this person is talking about here, there was a fairly significant estimation of how much lithium there is in the Appalachian mountain range areas, part of North Carolina, West Virginia, that kind of stuff. We've known for a long time that there are rare earth elements in lithium and stuff, because we know that they're associated in part with coal tailings. So this isn't really new. As far as I know, that this study was done that was pretty massive, and they put an actual number to their estimates on what's I have not seen if the estimate is a economically liberating, like if the if the lithium and other rare earths rare earths there are economically able to be liberated, or if this is just a, hey, this is how much we think is there, because not every spot is going to be mined, obviously. It doesn't guarantee, because nobody wants all the Appalachians to be, torn to shreds to mine this stuff. No one likes that. But if you can find good concentrations of lithium, I don't see why they wouldn't investigate that stuff. Is it going to make electric cars happen again? Well, electric cars aren't the only thing that use lithium. I mean, you're probably sitting with all sorts of stuff all over the place. And I would say any amount that we can take away from Chinese manufacturing and mining would be a good thing. We just have to go about it carefully and be, I guess, realistic about how much we can actually withdraw.
There's the problem you said, Linnea. You said China. It's availability and the where they're economically recoverable. It's, can we turn the raw material into usable material?
Yeah.
We have known for a couple of years now that there's a huge deposit of lithium in Arkansas. We know for a fact that lithium and other rare earths can be taken out of mine tailings, as you say, especially coal mine tailings, but not just copper mine tailings, zinc mine tailings. They're all over the country, and the tailings for some of these things, it'd be a good use for them. There's competition for coal if you like concrete. But we can produce all of these minerals we want in the U.S., all of them. Oh, let's just go all in on mining. If we can't refine them here, what we're going to end up doing is mining them, shipping them to China, where they will refine them, and then they'll sell them back to us.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, we're much further along in the mining of new materials than we are in setting up factories that will process those materials here into usable technologies.
Yeah.
And lithium is pretty nasty to process too.
It's a very nasty process.
Yeah. Yeah. And that graphic that we showed on the screen, that was actually shared by Secretary Doug Burgum on his X feed. And actually our friend, our colleague, Donald Kendall found that and shared it with us this week at Heartland. So interesting.
Yeah. And it said, I kind of leaned in and read that tiny text, and it said that it is undiscovered. That means they actually have not like poked a hole in the ground or dug cores or anything to find it physically. But so it's like an estimated approximation of economically recoverable lithium. So that means at current prices, it is economically recoverable with a bunch of caveats, obviously.
Right.
If people say, no, you're not doing an open pit mine in my backyard, then obviously it's not economically recoverable in that particular place. But there may be other places where it is.
Right. Yeah.
So,
And the
Linnea,
question was about North Carolina.
aren't we being told there's a battery breakthrough right around the corner, and we're not going to need lithium anyway?
Oh, yeah, that's
Wrong.
right. We don't need it. So, yeah. So it's interesting, but no, it doesn't mean that electric cars are going to suddenly become more popular, because I can guarantee that whatever lithium that we mine, and if we were to be able to process it, it would still be cheaper, or it would still be more expensive than the lithium and lithium products that we can get from China, because we're not using slave labor and we care about the environment. So we're not just going to dump the residue toxins out into a lake or something that's exposed to the air. We're just not going to do that. So it would be more expensive. But I think it's worth it to do it anyway, just to cut China off. But that's my personal opinion, and not necessarily the opinion of the Heartland Institute or my fellow panelists. So
it's my opinion. I put national security above economics all the time.
That's what Adam Smith said to do anyway. All right. So Wheelman says, question for the panel, or just Anthony. So I'll pitch it to Anthony first. I've heard that if there are any human impacts on warming, it's from CFCs. What's your take?
Well, CFCs really, yes, they have a global warming potential that is huge compared to carbon dioxide, but they have a short lifetime in the atmosphere for the most part. They do get broken down by high-level cosmic rays and sunlight and UV and so forth. And there's really not a whole lot of evidence that CFCs have caused global warming of any sorts, any real magnitude. There's been a lot of controversy surrounding CFCs that they may not really have any effect at all. The whole thing got started with the idea that these CFCs, which are components, of aerosol cans and air conditioning units and so forth and so on, weren't actually causing any real damage. And the thing about it is that the Antarctica, you heard about the Antarctic ozone hole that CFCs were supposedly causing. Well, we've reduced CFCs tremendously in industrial use and in home and personal use. And yet there hasn't really been all that great of a change down in Antarctica. And a lot of people have posited that, well, that Antarctic ozone hole was always there anyway. And it's just because we discovered it and we could see it for the first time, someone posited that it had to do with a chemical reaction associated with CFCs. Just doesn't seem to hold up over time. So, I'm just not sure there's any real concern about CFCs. They do eventually break down. I know the ozone hole has not expanded and turned everybody into a sunburned mass of people.
And the hole was, to be clear, the hole was a misnomer. There was never a hole. There was a thinning of the ozone layer down in Antarctica, which to some extent makes very little sense, right? We have ozone at ground level, which is where CFCs are being released. And yet they're somehow not breaking up the CFCs at ground level, but they travel all the way to Antarctica because that's where everyone wants to vacation. And there they cause the ozone hole, as opposed to the atmosphere above us.
Right. All right. So Gerard Marsh wants to know if they can borrow Lee Zeldin in the United Kingdom for a while. No, maybe you can have him when we're done, but you cannot have him now. He's got too much work to do. Chris Nisbet asks, have the experts considered that they really can't even measure the speed of the Atlantic I cannot say the second word, oscillating currents with any great accuracy? So that's the AMOC. Meridional, is that how you pronounce that? I have a hard time with it.
Yeah.
Anthony?
I'm sorry, I was doing a little research there. What was it?
How do they measure the speed of AMOC, and can they do it with any great accuracy?
Well, they have an array of sensors that are out in the Atlantic. It's called the Rapid Array, and so they're doing their job measuring that, and they have over the last, they've been going since 2004. And since then, they've seen speed ups and slowdowns. There's a slight overall downward trend in that 20 plus years, but nothing to be alarmed about. So that's what they're using to measure it.
Yep. And guys, we're already kind of going over. So unfortunately, I'm really not going to be able to get to most of the questions here. So I'm trying to pick some good sciencey ones and some good policy ones. You all have good questions, but I'm being picky about them. So let's see. This one's really fast. Michael asks, do we still get all of our transformers from China? I think so. I think we get at least most of them from China. I don't think that's changed because that kind of shift in industrial purchase doesn't happen quickly unless there's very dramatic government intervention. So I think we are still getting them. Let's see. Let's go for... This is from Darren, who says, do we know if Europe has moved their heat measuring devices outside of UHI?
Well, we do know that have not.
Yeah. Yeah, we do know that they have not.
No, they haven't. In fact, look, there's two things about your ground-based temperature stations. You want as much continuity as possible. And the ground-based stations are not designed to measure global climate change. They're designed to measure local temperatures. And they do that fairly well. I want to know what the temperature here in Dallas is. And the temperature in Dallas is affected by the urban heat island effect. I feel the urban heat island effect, modified temperature. And that's what I want reported. So I know what it feels like when I go outside. Well, the same thing is true in the UK and across Europe. There's been some that have closed. There have been some that have cited better, just like here in the US. But for the most part, for continuity and because...
Oh, he's gone. It's frozen again. I was just going to say, I would like to have one of those fake phantom... I'd like to have one of those fake phantom weather stations at my house and have it be 75 degrees every day. It would be awesome. I would really enjoy that.
If you're in Chicago, that'd be some pretty dramatic climate change, though, Jim. Yeah. All right. This is okay, here's a good question. I like this one. I'm going to pitch it to Anthony first, and then we can all say what we think. I keep hearing Tornado Alley is shifting. And what he means is shifting is that the bulk of tornadoes are shifting more towards the east than their traditional Tornado Alley area. Is that true? And if so, why? What's the cause?
Well, the cause is really simple. There are more mobile home parks in the eastern United States than the west.
Yes, Tornado Magnus is what we call them.
Yeah, right. You know, this is just statistical sophistry. Yeah, so there's a shift to the east. So big deal, you know? That doesn't prove anything. You don't know what the long-term shift has been in the United States, you know, that goes back to 300 years. I mean, climate and the earth operate on very, very long time cycles, much longer than human lifespans. And so just because it shifted east doesn't mean anything.
And I guess the big deal would be that there's just a higher population concentration more to the east. But I've looked at some of the data on this. I think it could be a real phenomenon, but it also could be another artifact of increased Doppler coverage too.
That's possible.
Because you're not going to see, if you have a whole lot of tornadoes spawning in areas, or especially small ones spawning in the woods, which the east and the kind of middle of the bottom of the Appalachian chain there is a lot more heavily forested than Oklahoma, right? It's going to be harder to spot those twisters in the first place. So I've seen statistical analyses that say that it's shifted east. I'm not sure that the physical data says so, but I am going through the entire country, state by state, looking at the weather conditions and whether or not certain types of storms and stuff have changed on a state by state basis. It's not as good probably as looking at entire ecoregions or something, but it's pretty good. And my hope is that we'll be able to see what it actually looks like. Whether or not there's more tornadoes in Tennessee or something, or Arkansas, than there were 50 years ago, or more like 30 years ago, because I try to only use the Doppler and satellite coverage era for that kind of data, just because it's better. It's even what the NCEI says to use is that kind of stuff. So at climateataglance.com, you can find the first thing that comes up on the page is a big map of the United States, and the ones that are in green are the ones that I have covered. You can click on them and look at the weather, the like most common weather conditions for each state and what their long-term trends look like. It's a process. I haven't done Tennessee yet. I think I've done Arkansas. So that I'm not sure I looked at tornadoes for Arkansas though. So I can update that information as we go along, and we will see.
I like Linnea and Anthony. I'm a little bit skeptical of the statistical analysis as opposed to direct measurement of data and toting up numbers. I suspect it has to do in some part is how you do your, what assumptions you built in and what manipulations in the computer models are. And I can just tell you anecdotally, I have lived in Tornado Alley, except for the short time I lived in South Dakota and Montana. I've lived in Tornado Alley my whole life. Hadn't changed here in Texas. It hasn't changed in Ohio, where I lived for years, which is part of Tornado Alley. Tornado Alley is sort of an amorphous thing. An alley you think of as a sort of a very narrow. Tornado Alley is a broad swath of the Midwest, but even down to the Southwest Texas and up to the upper Midwest. And I'm just not convinced that it shifted that much. I know that Oklahomans right now are sitting there saying, we sure wish it would shift. Give us a break. The people in Mineral Wells this week, same thing.
Yeah, I'll have to look into it a bit more, because most of the time when I've seen people talk about the shift east from tornadoes, they're talking about it in terms of damage costs, not physical number of funnels a lot of the time. So that doesn't mean that there aren't studies out there that have looked at the actual count. In the media, it's usually damage costs. And when someone says damage costs from this particular type of storm has increased over time, like they say in Illinois with hail or Texas with hail or something, that's a function of property values and more property existing that has value for you to destroy. In the 1950s, there weren't, big houses, multi-million-dollar houses with solar panels on the roof that can be destroyed by hail, or, and properties are a lot nicer now in the deep South than they were. You still have, smaller neighborhoods, but you also have kind of an upbuilding of these kind of like multi-million-dollar homes and stuff. And when a trailer park gets obliterated by a tornado, it's devastating. But it doesn't cost as much as when a upper class neighborhood gets obliterated by a tornado. And so I think some of it is that. I would have to look for more data though. And I think that's all we're going to take, because we're already 8 minutes over our usual overtime. So I'm going to hand it back to Jim.
Yeah, this was supposed to be a 1 hour show when we started.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't been a 1 hour show in a while, and that's a good thing. Hey, this was episode number 200. We should go over a little bit of time on that one. But thank you, everybody on the show: Anthony Watts, Sterling Burnett, Linnea Lucan, and our producer, Andy Singer, behind the scenes for bringing us a fantastic episode number 200 of the Climate Realism Show today. I want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFAC, the CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. I also, of course, want to thank our wonderful audience. You were cracking us up with your comments in the chat this week, as you always do. It was fantastic. And that'll do it for today's show. And we will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.